Hello, everybody. I'm not gonna lie, it is a little bit late, and I am a bit tad tireder than I usually am, but I'm gonna try to soldier through this. I'm not sure if that's even the right attitude of going through this, but especially given the book right here. It's Antkind by Charlie Kaufman. I believe this is his. Yeah, this is only novel. And I initially, it's been a couple years, although I do remember being so at that point being a enough of a Charlie Kaufman fan uh, that when this came out in 2020, like I pre-ordered it, and I was like, "Dang, I gotta get this," because I heard about a few little teasers of it, I think, and I think it came out like summer or something of that year, and then I ended up buying it right away as soon as I could. And but it took me a little while to get into it or to actually start the book. I don't think I actually started to like early 2021 or so. To my shame, but I did want to try to give it, a good amount of time. It is 700 something pages, and that kind of makes sense once you get into it, like a little why it's that that length, and it's not quite as bad as it's not as far as lengthwise. Not quite as bad as you might think. I mean, um, I'd say it doesn't. It's not. There's no reason that should dissuade you. So why? What is this book concern? So what is this book about? Well, it's about a film critic, very comically like self-loathing. I want to say, well, maybe not self-loathing. Maybe in the sense of like maybe a Woody Allen type of self-insert type of guy. His name is B. Rosenberger, or is it Rosenberger? Um, right away, there's a bit of a kind of that kind of reminded me of Humbert from Lolita Nabokov. I'm not sure if that's a oblique reference or something, or maybe Charlie Kaufman just kind of thought it was a funny name to have this guy. He's like, so characteristically a Jewish name, yet the whole entire time, like the kind of ironic, I guess, running gag throughout the novel is he constantly is like denies any fact that or any accusations that he's Jewish, even though he has like the most Jewish name in there. Um, which I don't think is at all anti-Semitic, because Charlie Kaufman himself is also, I think, Jewish as well. Um, so yeah, I think it was funny. It's a funny book. It's very richly layered. It's manic. It's a lot of it's almost the point of bonkers. I don't want to say that in a bad and not in a negative sense, just in a kind of everything is so out there, like it gets really crazy. Um, Definitely postmodern, I think makes sense. So B. Rosenberg is he basically is this film critic, and he's kind of a part of that, like the culture of um like he's very progressive and liberal, but he's a part of this kind of like very almost like regressively, where he's like to the point where he's like using pronouns. He's like, well, actually, I'm going one step further by saying self, instead of themself for themselves. Like he's trying to make it seem like he's like, oh, I'm so, and I'm not sure how much of this is like, it's like you get the sense because it's first person. How much of this is like the unreliable? You probably a lot of it unreliable narrative. How much of this is done ironically, like Zero ironically referring to himself as the self. It almost sounds like it, but he's somebody who revels and cherishes like, classic films, like he keeps mentioning Hazard Balthazar, I think is the name, the French film by, I'm drawing a blank, I think it's Bad Benit, not, husband, it came out in the 60s, and it's about a donkey, and it's drawn comparisons to Dostoevsky's The Idiot, I think, because he's the donkey throughout the whole entire thing is just like a flat arc. I've seen it once some years ago. Pretty interesting take, I think. It's for definitely French new wave cinema, I think, along with Jean-Luc Godard, yeah. And yeah, it just concerns a donkey, and it's like a donkey. It's like a flat arc, and it's like it's showing how everybody in it's interesting dynamic between the contrast between the family that this donkey owns, or no, the other way around. Um, family, they own this donkey, and it's kind of observing as if it's your point of view is like you're a fly on the wall watching this donkey, and like you watch like the girl in the family, the daughter, like she's going out with like terrible men, and always comes home and then hugs the donkey, and it's like a symbolic kind of that positive kind of um the capacity animals have, like they're just a flat thing. They don't actually offer anything. So, but yeah, that's the kind of thing that Rosenberg talks about. He's like, I'm such a big fan of these type of movies, and then he'll mention Judd Apatow movies as well, and he'll just like go on and on about it, which I thought was actually like really hilarious. Like these long winded like critiques of like the shaving scene from the wax chesting scene from the 40-year-old virgin and Steve Carell. It's just like so like he goes down to the minutiae of like why it's so funny, and it's just like number one, it's like it teases at both the intellect and this and that, and it's like he writes it as if it's like a dissertation, like an academic paper, and it's just like a dumb slapstick comedy movie. It's like, and it's like not meant to be taken that seriously. I just find that very funny, and yeah, it's like so. B. Rosenberg, stumbles upon he's kind of disgraced. Not There's a number of different like really ridiculous things that happens like when he's that might have led to that. Uh, yeah, there's a lot of like other funny moments, like him kind of like walking into different like potholes and stuff. Like it was like, but there's also a continuing thing where he's like, well, actually no, he's not necessarily disgraced, but he's kind of like fallen from, like he doesn't have, he's like plateaued. I think like he can't find any work. No, he can find work, but he just can't find like the traction or like the attention he once got, and the esteem by the public, and he's trying to kind of win people over, and then he stumbles upon like the perfect when he's down in I should note that this starts with a kind of a cold opening, which I really liked, which talked about I can't remember the name of the monster. It's like they called it, well, it was called a monster, but it was actually happened to be just like some type of jellyfish or a whale. I think it was like something washed up, like some sea life washed up, and people started calling it like a something or other monster. It was on the East Coast, I think, and it started out kind of with a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, first person, not from Rosenberg, but from a different character, and I thought that was pretty interesting, because the fact that it was so bloated and so construed that people began calling it a monster, even though it was like it was clearly just a marine biologist later identified it as some kind of whale. So anyway, going back to Rosenberg's storyline, he goes down to the South, where I can't remember the reason he goes down there, but when he does, he stumbles upon this man by the name of Ingo Cutbirth, who is the like epitome of every single, like the walking embodiment of every like trope, I don't know, like of everything that Rosenberg loves about cinema, like or the art and culture and everything. Like to him, he's just like his wet dream. It's just total. Like he's African American. He's in his 90s. He's a minority, and he's a filmmaker that has made a stop motion, excuse me, film that is 90 days. I think it takes 3 months, I think 2 to 3 months for him to film. I'm not film, but to show. It's like as in it's 3 months long. Like I know, it's ridiculous, right? It takes, like he was saying, like it took, like, you would basically have to provide for sleep. You'd have to like get, it's like, I think the longest one of the longest operas is like The Ring. I think The Ring cycle by Richard Wagner, and that's like a good week. And this is like like several times that, and it's just it's so alluring to Rosenberg, because this is like his treasure trove. So he's like stumbled upon treasure, like hidden gold. And he's trying to figure out like how to promote Cuthbert. Like he's trying to figure out like how do I do this? Like how do I get the public to, how do I, he's like, so basically he ends up going to a he sees Ingo, and then he goes down in his basement, I think, where it is. And this is very reminiscent of Henry Darger, a man who, I think he actually mentions by name in the book, that the man who made the Vivian Girls, like made up the Vivian Girls and like made up this whole entire, like 3,000 page, I think, like long, super long narrative, and paint, and all sorts of different like print. He used like a combination of like printmaking and tools and all sorts of different things to string together this extremely like involved, complicated web of storylines of like the Vivian Girls, and it's like kind of like a good against evil kind of thing, where the Vivian Girls are pure paragons of like childlike innocence, which stems from Henry Darger's own childhood, when he was committed to, I think, an insane, like a juvenile kind of detention thing, but it was also kind of an insane asylum, I believe, to kind of like some type of mental place where he could get, professionally. And then, of course, at this time in the early 1900s, he was born in like 1895, I think, and or sometime in the mid to late 1890s. And then he passed away in his 70s, I believe. And that his effect in his childhood when he ran away from that. And I think I said in another video that I actually visited while I was in Illinois, in Chicago. I think in the downtown area, I went to this Intuit, Intuit, I think, art museum. It's very great. Local, like, outsider art. That's a key word here, outsider art. So yeah, that's, I went there, and it was like a really fascinating exhibition that they had. They actually had a 3-day, I think, or might have been, like every other weekday or something, like every week or whatever, they'd change and they'd go to the next aspect of Henry Darger's life, I think. So it was like, it was like one of them was like more focused on his childhood, I think, and because he was hence why it's in Chicago, he was a Chicago-born artist, and how Henry Darger, like, there's different aspects of his life, and then basically Henry Darger, like, his work was never shown to anybody. Like, he died without anybody ever realizing his true talent. And that's why I feel that diversion was necessary, because Rosenberg actually, he's an interesting character, because at one point he seems like kind of like a pathetic, kvetching, like overindulgent, self-indulgent, self-aggrandizing, moralizing, virtue signaling type of guy who's like, like the Twitter, the war of people on Twitter, and kind of deal with the guy who would be on there moralizing when he has no ground to actually say any of this stuff. But at the same time, he also has a capacity to understand Ingo's talent as well. So he's like very good at sniffing that stuff out. But there's also kind of a elitist smugness to him. Like he's like a, I don't know if you'd call him chaotic good. Like I mean, this might be a simplistic way of putting it, but he'll go any measures to kind of make sure that, Ingo is like made, it's like, I'll make sure people, because he's a minority, he's this, he's that, he's hidden his work, he's he's blind. He's blind too. He's like, I think, right? Because he tacked so many different traits on there. I thought it was really funny. But tragically, what happens is, spoilers, Ingo Cutbirth dies, and not, well, obviously to old age, because he's in his 90s, so it's like, it's not, it's like when people say, like, dying in is a tired point, but I think, like, this idea of, like, saying that someone's dying of old age is kind of a, is a better than, natural causes, like that type of thing, because there's really what other way is there to die? So, liver failure or whatever. But Ingo Prokofiev dies. But before that, I think it's I don't know what order was it that Rosenberg takes the footage of the films and he's like, well, I'm going to make sure people see this, and he tries to get and then foolishly he goes to this fast food joint called Sammy's, I think, which is very funny. Somebody actually made like a pretty funny logo, like it was a really creative like logo of like what they'd imagine this Sammy's. Sammy's is basically in this like a fictional fast food joint that's basically a bit like maybe Hardee's, I guess, Hardee's Jr. or something, or what's the name of the other, Carl's Jr. or something like that. I mix those up. Hardee's Jr. They're basically the same thing. Hardee's and kind of just the same. I think they're owned by the same umbrella company or something. I don't know. But anyway, he goes to this place and he's gets like this greasy burger and he's like, and then he ends up. I can't remember what happens. He foolishly leaves it in his car, and the heat of the southern sun. I think it's like down in the south, like Georgia. So it's like deep down, blistering sun is like searing a it's like almost like a tragic comedy in a sense, because everything that can go wrong, like classic Murphy's Law, is like anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So maybe in a sense he's not that foolish, but the film ends up burning all the way, like all the film reels, and this is very old, and he shot it on stop motion. I figure I should add a little more detail on the nature of the film. It's on stop motion, frame by frame, and it's like I can't remember exactly. Like he described like each plot like it's like a very all encompassing, like the human condition, everything in it. It's like about it's like a bit of his own life, Ingo's own life. It's self insertion, auteur sense, but he's also he's drawing from like the plight of all minorities and people like him everywhere, and every man. He has it all. Like he's a jack of all trades kind of thing. He's he's written this film and he's filmed it himself, and he's taken the painstakingly throughout 90 years. I think he started when he was like, can't remember. No, wait, I think Ingo is supposed to be like almost a centurion, maybe almost a century old, and he actually started on this when he was in his teens. So it's like, yeah, like 7 or 8 decades of just endless, stitching this thing together. And his masterwork, his Chef Steve Chef Steve Envoy, is like finally came to its culminating. It's like, and in a sense, like similar to Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York. It's like the idea of the auteur outliving, or not out, or the work outliving the artist, the output that the art, the finished, work that the actually unfinished, because it's perpetually like in Synecdoche, New York. The idea that his Galen Cotard's play is so out there, and it's so all encompassing. It's so ambitious that he can't, and it's so true to life that he can't possibly explain. It's like the dilemma of, I guess it's in philosophical terms too, like the dilemma, and with I guess you'd say Derrida, or so Jean Jacques Baudelaire, with simulacrum and the simulacra and the simulacrum. I've yet to have read it. I do have it on my bookshelf, I swear. But it's like, Derrida said something very similar, or not quite similar maybe, but something that I thought profound. Just something to the effect of, excuse me, hiccuping a lot. That we are doomed to be indebted to like signs. Like we're doomed to forever be reduced to like signology and symbology. Like we can't escape that ever. Like whether you work at a coffee shop and you'll always be the person who works at the car, you'll always be a barista, or you'll always be a car mechanic, you'll always be taking care of people's transmissions, or changing the car, whatever fluid or brake fluid or whatever. You'll always be identified and hung up with this concept, this overarching concept, because we need signs to actually understand things. So that's when you come down to the thing where it's like, well, yeah, it's like when you go down to the actual nitty gritty of like past that, like what the post-structuralist, postmodernists are trying to do is deconstruct that, which is why it's called deconstructionalism, down to its core. And when you realize there's actually nothing, it's like, well, when we show a sign on the road, signifies, that, so let's say that that this lane is going to end, like you see a broken line, and it's in a way that transcends language. I think, Noam Chomsky had a universal thing on language, on like how every language follows, or at least most every language, aside from maybe the ones with the scripts, like the Cyrillic script, maybe like Russian, and or even some of the Arabian languages too, with like the kind of almost like a calligraphy type of deal. I'm not really too keen on languages and scripts and all that, but I think they all have their alphabet, all follows similar rules, like patterns, right? Like I think Steven Pinker might have said this too, or he might have been echoing Chomsky. I'm not sure. In the Blank Slate, when he's talking about that all, like sentences have in common like a preposition, like he drank the beer from the bottle. It's like a transitive. I don't know what you call it. From, it's the preposition, right? I'm not sure about the grammatical thing. You think I know about this because I'm a writer, but I'm actually not so keen on certain things. Like for some reason, I don't know. I get things mixed up. Aside from like subjects, objects, and stuff, but yeah, like these all follow that similar lines. They all kind of echo each other. They all, I think, but then again, it also kind of doesn't, because I think like in French, for example, I think like sometimes they preface the sentence with, or the start of the sentence would be like, are you going to the cathedral or something, I think they say like, they might actually put that, sometimes they'll put the subject of the sentence first, I think. I'm not too sure, but that being said, I'm trying to go back to what I was talking about. There's a very postmodern undertone, or I should say overtone, to this novel, because B. Rosenberger has kind of found the perfect fit, for what he's trying to get. He's like, and he dies, and of course, it's not that surprising that Ingo Cuthbert, his age, dies, and he's at a loss on how to, because Rosenberger has actually seen the film once. He's done the whole through. He stayed at Ingo Cuthbert's house, and accommodated. He was Cuthbert accommodated him and was like, make yourself comfortable, watch the whole entire film. And he does, and he's like, well, that was life-changing. That was like, totally worth the 3 months. It's almost like a hibernation type of cycle that he goes. But yeah, it's just hilarious. It reminds me a lot of Infinite Jest too, with the title, the titular film Infinite Jest being like a drawing from Shakespeare too, like I think from Macbeth. But I think with it's the film is actually like this very long, intricate thing as well, similar to Cuthbert, which is why I bring it up. And it's so good and so entertaining that people can't do anything but watch the film. So it's like, like it's like a kind of, it's almost like I guess like a metaphor for drugs as well. I think there's a lot of different drug where some of them are like barefaced, like, okay, like I think right off the bat you kind of get that, David Foster Wallace is talking about, like drugs in the scene, or like straight up addiction, or Alcoholics Anonymous, and the idea of like trying to overcome the struggle, like of calling yourself an addict, or like trying to the weird kind of like counterintuitive ways that AA uses that that he that Wallace dealt with in his own life. I don't know why I'm talking so much about this, because I'm actually going to review the book soon, I promise. You'll notice that a lot of the books, most of the books that I haven't reviewed yet are the ones that are like the longest ones, so they're I'll have to rectify that soon. But back to this book. What I was trying to say about Infinite Jest was basically it reminded me of Ingo Cuthbert's film because it's so. I think maybe the difference being with Infinite Jest is that the film is addicting, but I think it's actually a bit of the inverse with Cuthbert's Day because one of the main things I think, not to take away from any of the pleasant analogies or somewhat similarities, but I think the one of the more prominent themes in the novel is like the attention span of the modern day kind of not just millennials, not just Gen Zs, because this is like a pretty recent book. I think it's pretty contemporary, and it's safe to say. And even if Charlie Kaufman started this, even if he started it 15 years ago, I think it would still hold true because I think there's a big thing with movies too is like this idea of like a lot of people like they don't want the nitty gritty. Like the main thing is like most people don't want to deal with, to contend with, and to consume large, long narrative form art. Like nobody likes it. Maybe in the finer culture where there's like kind of snobs and stuff like that, like me. You can watch our 3 hour long Apocalypse Now Redux cut or whatever, or Tarkovsky or whatever, or Kieslowski or whatever else. But yeah, it's like I think there are people that do like that, but there'll always be kind of like there'll always be like a difference between that because I think at the end of the day there's going to be, and that doesn't say the same thing for all movies. I mean, I think there's movies that are like I think like Avatar Way of the Water is 3 hours or something, and it's like a popular type of thing. But I think the main thing with this is that Kaufman's getting at is that the attention spans are so low, and then even this takes it should be said that this takes place in a heightened version of the real world. It's like very a lot of what's happening is like accentuated, to like almost to like to a hysterical degree, because so much of what like people can't stand to in the world of Twitter wars and short clips or TikTok, it's very hard to get Ingo's film across. So even and that's the most damning thing of all is that the actual like every scrap of Cuthbert's film is burned. It's scorched, tragically so, and haplessly is in the back of Rosenberg's car. So he's like at a loss of what to do, and then what follows is like a very hilarious. I keep saying the word hilarious, but I can't really think of any way to describe it. It's just that classic kind of Charlie Kaufman main character kind of thing where or at least I identify with like a good thing of them, and then or a good deal of them, and until they start doing like really crazy stuff and like going off the wall crazy, like kind of like in Being John Malkovich with I think it was Lester, but I think it was John Cusack's character. He does a really great job. You're like, darn, I really actually feel for this guy. He's like, he's all about art for art's sake. He's a puppeteer. He's like, nobody likes him. But then he starts doing really crazy things, and you're like, well, I don't know how far I actually agree with him. He's trying to get into like Malkovich's head, and using that to kind of to voice his own thing. Like he basically uses that as his own vehicle to kind of do puppetry, and it's like very. I think it's brilliant. I love that movie so much because he's like the themes of puppetry, and then using John Malkovich as a kind of puppet for his own ends meet. His own selfish ends. So it's kind of a thing. Catherine Keener's great in that as well as in St. Act New York. You don't have to talk about the more movies that I really like as well. Some of these days, but what I found compelling too is in the novel is that yes, Rosenberger is, you know, has issues, and he, um, like, is, I'm not sure exactly, because if he is totally sincere in his, like, lunacy, like, and I use that just hyperbolically, not necessarily mentally, but, especially since he's almost a caricature of, the manic, almost like, you can almost see him, like he talks about, like, in the beginning of the book, like, he's talking about, like, how he has, like, a, port wine birthmark, I think, on his, like, on his upper face, and he's like, um, you get kind of like a, underground Dostoevsky type of vibe from him, and yeah, it's like he's just totally. There's moments when he, like, lambasts, the real life Charlie Kaufman, so this gets, like, very meta, and he's like, uh, it's almost recursively so at times, and he just, like, mentions Charlie Kaufman is like, yeah, it's like, he wrote that awful movie Synecdoche in New York. It's like a sob fest, and it's self-indulgent, masturbatory. Oh, it's horrible. Like, how could anybody watch that, sit there for, for the 2.5 hours or whatever, and actually digest that? It's like horrible. It makes me sick to my stomach. So I thought that was pretty funny. Some people kind of disagreed. They said it was, like, a little bit like, one article, I think, was like, I don't know if this was a Vulture article or something, so it might have just been like one of those op-ed type of things you see in the culture sphere of things online, where it's like, yeah, Charlie Kaufman disappeared up his own ass in his new book Antkind, something to that effect. And I don't really agree with that. I think he he disappears in a very nuanced kind of, in a way, yes, but it's all, I'm not trying to say it just because it's under the context or pretext or whatever of postmodern that you get it with anything, not so, but there's a freedom that comes with that too. It's like the ability to kind of transcend genres, to be sincere, but to also dispense with that, or to dispose of that, and then use irony at all, but to use irony in a way that is sincere. Like, it's like this weird thing where you can double meanings, triple meanings. You can reference cross, what's the name? Intertextuality. You can reference, multiple, like, mediums, like film and, photography, music. It's like there's so much freedom that, in a way, that's like a Sartrean sense, that you're, like, doomed in a sense, because you're like, there's so much responsibility in that freedom, and you don't know, like, where to go. So yeah, that, and I think, yes, there should be a certain amount of responsibility that you take. Like, okay, well, I still have to make it make sense, and I still has to have, it doesn't have to start with the hero's journey, of course. Obviously, it doesn't have to be the, Joseph Campbell type of deal, where it's like the hero call to action. It doesn't have to follow that formula, but it could very well be at least have, like a first, like an act, 3-act type of deal, in that process, which is what I actually see in the book. There actually is, like, a 3-act type of thing, very much like a film. Not surprising, because Charlie Kaufman's, like, main trade is screenwriter, brilliant screenwriter. I don't know if that should be stated already, but he that's why there's a lot of cinema things, but it's like, in this too, but it's also poking fun at it. That's why it's hard to explain. There's lots of layers to it. Yes, you get the sense that Rosenberger is like a facetious, kind of like is in love with himself, but also kind of like lowers himself too. Like, he purposely does it, like, as to, the unself. But it's very, it's very, like, facile, and, like, like, you don't buy it so much. But then there's also other sides to him. Like, he's very long, convoluted things where he'll, like, there's one point when he's, like, trying to get, when he goes back and he's, like, trying to get Cuthbert's film, like, sold to he's trying to remember it, because he saw the film, but it's, like, kind of fading, and he's trying to go, he gets to a hypnotist, and he hires a hypnotist. And then there's another part where he actually, I think, gets like a burn scar, like he gets scars, I think, because from the burn, I think, when he's trying to save it. And then he ends up, this is like actually very, very funny too, like laugh out loud, like I was like laughing out loud when I read it. When he's like talking about like getting surgery to get like grafting, and then because he his hair, like part of his hair fell off, like they somehow the surgeons felt the need, I don't know, they're trying to cut corners or something. He ended up using his pubic hair downstairs to actually like compensate for the hair that's thinning, that's like fell off in the fire. It's just like, but yeah, it's not just it's lighthearted. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's not, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's at the same time, it also isn't just limited to only just like kind of like laugh out, like laughing the whole way or jokes the whole way, which is why I think I'd actually would say it's like it's not actually a comedy. I guess it's not. It's I guess it's like kind of like the best medicine of like taking in bad news is with laughter, and it's like kind of like the laughter is almost ancillary. It's almost like a echoing type of thing in the background where it's like a lot of very, but on the face it's actually a lot of very depressing things, like like this, like this film critic can like nobody like actually wants to listen or like actually wants to hear or anything about this Ingo Cuthbert. It is a 3-month long movie, like epic movie. Like everybody's just so consumed in their own, in a fast paced world environment. So like he's at a loss of what to do. So now there comes like this kind of like this diversion in the novel, but I'm not even sure if I even call it a diversion considering the style that is proposed here. But he goes into a kind of like down into a spins out of control into like this thing where he's like starts obsessing over like this one Asian lady named Sai, I think, like this one I think she's supposed to be like a singer or something like that, and she's like he fancies her, and he's like, oh, okay, she's like, my dream girl, like, and like he just keeps like doing like very creepy things, like trying to hit on her like a ton of times. And it's like a thing too where it's like you get the sense with some of other Kaufman's characters that are, there's like a, it's not, I don't think it's like a you sense a bit of this with Murakami as well, where there's like like very like stark looks into people's like sexuality, and like even at their worst, like when sexuality twists you into doing things that are just like, why the hell would I do that type of thing. And it's uncomfortable to read, and there are parts of this that are very uncomfortable to read, as I recall. But I wouldn't make that as good grounds for not reading the book. I think like there's like with movies, like there's like, and it's like, like there's times in adaptation where it's like, Nicolas Cage does a great job playing twins, Charlie Kaufman, just by their body language contrasting each other. And there's long diversions where like Charlie Kaufman's character can't stop like masturbating. It's like that's like the only, like he just is just preoccupied with that, and he's like he can't come to a decision. He can't actually make anything. He can't fructify or can't like bring anything to completion. So he kind of just like gets stuck in this cycle of just like, oh well, I'll just do this, and I'll just maybe tomorrow I'll write, or maybe this or that. But then he'll like get these great great bursts of inspiration, which I found kind of similar what's going on here. Like he gets stuck in these self-defeating cycles that don't make any sense in a, almost like in a because that's the great thing, is that Charlie Kaufman is like aware of the 3 acts. He's aware of structure, right? He's aware of form. He just doesn't either prefer it, or maybe he just doesn't he's aware of the lingering surface underneath, that there has to be something whittling something down into something cohesive, but he's also aware of the meta irony and all this stuff and these other devices. Like he's maybe a bit of a child in his time, and I don't know if he's boomer, sorry, baby boomer. The term almost sounds like necessarily denigrative, but I just mean that in a technical term, in the sense when he was born, I think in the late 50s. But yeah, I think like irony was big, or like maybe what he was doing is entirely unlike Thomas Pynchon, Gravity's Rainbow being almost unreadable. But I wouldn't say this is unreadable. I think this is pretty readable. It was for me. Like it was times when, whereas with Pynchon, sometimes it's just like, unless it's like the Crying of Lot 49, like it's like something like bigger like Gravity's Rainbow or Inherent Vice, like I haven't read yet, but it's a little bit of a taxing to read. But with this, it's like I personally found it like pretty entertaining to my to my own uh, kind of taste. I think like my taste, I was already kind of primed towards what Kaufman's writing would be like, and yeah, I thought it was great. Um, this is almost like 40 minutes. Jeez, I'm gonna cut this. I'm gonna cut to the chase pretty soon here. I'm trying to think of anything else that I'm leaving out. Oh yes, there's a whole after he's like there's then there's a whole thing with the clowns. It's a crazy read. He like falls in love with this clown lady, and then he gets go through this clown phase, and he's like, um, yeah, you could write that off too as being kind of like, okay, well, this isn't like necessary to the plot, but then again, it's like that's kind of like human nature though, is to kind of get involved in like weird infatuations and weird things like that, and it's just like very, um, yeah, it's like in that sense, it's like mentioning the hyperreal type of stuff. Like this is a world that's like completely, it takes place in a place like a lot of Coffin stuff. That's like the palette of reality. It's like it's you can say it's palatably like doable. You're like, okay, well, this I could see this happening, but then there's stuff that's just totally out there. You can never see that happening. Like in which is why it's called Antkind, is because there's this ant that is the in the future basically. I'm gonna cut to the chase. Is basically um, the it so kind of a jumps or lapse in kind of what happens in like the next 100 to 200 years, I believe, and it's like very what happens is basically that um, there's some references to stuff that's happening currently, contemporary culture, like Trump, and like the whole Trumpism and all that going on with the conservative slash Republican Party, and there's like a Trump clone, I think, that gets again, it's like another kind of self referential recursion type of deal going on, and Trump is just there's a clone of Trump, and he ends up kind of taking over. I think I'm not sure if he becomes president or what happens with him, but he's just kind of, it's like to the point where the Trump clone is like basically not really all that different from like the actual Trump clone, even though he's kind of created as like a almost in a joke type of way, almost like in a way that those what do you call those Sikh type of things? Um there's fortune teller type of things with the things like almost in the sense that those things are like kind of kitsch in a way. So like this very kitschy Trump clone is like taken venerated somehow as as a leader. And this wasn't laugh out loud funny for me, but it was in hindsight kind of funny. Just the fact that it's like not all that unlike Trump himself, but not to go on a kind of political tangent, but he was able to. I think Kaufman is able to kind of make that clear without taking up too much time and being like, well, yeah, we're just gonna reduce this novel to kind of just a political kind of hodgepodge. Just basically, you know, take take swings at political figures you don't like, and in that sense, you could always just write a book about Mao Zedong or Putin and just have them duke it out all day long. But in that sense, he just kind of made it a part in a long scheme of what's happening. And then there's a future basically that I think this Trump thing is like kind of like it just fades away, and then there's an ants. Ants basically take over the world at this point, like conscious, semi-conscious, or sentient ants. And basically, there's no traces left of humanity. Everything's kind of like gone, fell out of disarray. Everything's out of order. Everything's. I think there's only some kind of finite glimpse, speck of dust, kind of like lingering, and the only thing that's left is like a tiny bit of like Cuthbert's film, very beautiful film, and that makes its way into contact with one of these ants that sees it, takes a glimpse at it, and is like it's moved by it, and the thing is like made less lonely by Cuthbert, and showing that actually that art being the thing, being so why art is so important, especially to Charlie Kaufman and or pretty much a lot of us, to the most everyday people. I think what's important is because that's when you take it down to its very core. I think what it is it makes you less alone. Like books, TV, certain TV shows that they kind of, there's a kind of like we're in this together kind of sentiment. That might sound a little bit sappy, and it might sound like a cliche, but I think it's totally convincing. I think on its own. I think on that on those terms, I think it's quite like adequate in the sense that Cuthbert's film is like in its own time was completely ignored. Why nobody cared, and then to this ant, the tiniest thing, almost like pathetic, right? Although there's an interesting essay I should read again by Thomas Nagel, where he talks about like the mayfly, being like, well, the mayfly doesn't think about all these things, but well, like the thing, the possibilities and like what could have happened, different universes or different things. Like it only knows that it's happy in the mayfly's constitution. But this ant, since it's, he has capacity for understanding, it's like thus is reveling in hunger, and this is satiates this, he's made, because of that, it was like human-like programming it has to be able to kind of understand art, and thus understand Cuthbert and like his struggle and his, the suffering it took for him to kind of like come into his own, and like he's ignored during his life, and finally got the attention he deserved. Just like Kafka too. Like Kafka is another great example because he was ignored and downtrodden. He was misused and basically abused by his father, and his mother too just kind of enabled his father a lot of the times. And Franz Kafka basically ended up being very kind of hid away his talents, and he wrote all his life, but he also was mainly just like worked a day job as an insurance clerk, I believe, like insurance salesman, I believe, and he had to kind of hide away all this like this great love of literature and writing, and it wasn't until after his death that like so many of us read him today. It's like it was hailed as one of the greats. So that's kind of, I think Kaufman actually uses that as an example in the book. So he says something to the effect of like, I want to be Cuthbert's Max Brod, So, yeah, I think I'll end on that note. It's a bit of a long-winded review, and there's probably a lot of divergence and stuff throughout it. I know for a fact there are. But hopefully it all sticks together somehow. I'm kind of getting a little bit too tuckered out to kind of continue here, so I'll end on that. Antkind by Charlie Kaufman. Definitely recommend it. Like I said, not for everybody. Maybe not everybody will get the same kind of experience or joy that I took out of it. But if you're a fan of Charlie Kaufman, I definitely recommend it. But if you're kind of new to the literature sphere, I'd say like maybe take it a little bit slowly, maybe. Just and yeah, it's definitely due for a reread. So thank you for watching.